Hi, hello. So today is about a question that Thierry asked on the community, how to access admin settings. So what is an admin settings? Um, Here I am in a sample library application, and I can declare some parameters in configuration. And for example, I created one bookworm. So it's data, so it looks pretty much like a record definition. So you can add some character field, numbers, and here you can say where you want the settings to appear. So here, for example, I want to make them appear in the navigation sidebar, and I want to show it in the application and Innovation Studio and with this menu. So what does it mean? Here I am in the application. I have a settings icon here. So here you can see I can have my sample library menu I declared here, and I have my bookworm, which is my component name. So I want the user to give its preferred book and author, so I have both of them. So the UI is creating dynamically depending on the data you chose here, and you can give like a default value for the fields. So when you reset to the default value, you will have the default value and you can save them again. So you can see the settings here in the application itself because I chose both. But you can also choose to display only in the application or in Innovation Studio or in both. So here in Innovation Studio you can find it under Administration, Sample Library, and Bookworm. So why is it useful? Let's say you want to, for example, you have an application that can connect to another server and you want an administrator like a tenant admin to fill the information to the server, the API port, login and password, those kind of information. So you can create a configuration and it will be displayed. They will enter data, and now the goal is to see how we can access those data. So we can access those data from Java side and UI side. So here I created a small example. So I created a REST API on the backend that will fetch the values from the backend in Java, and the UI is calling this REST API. But I get also the same values from the UI directly. So I have objects on the back and objects on the UI. So it's not really user-friendly to use. It's not as straightforward as getting record instances, for example. So you might have some difficulty, that's why the example might be useful. So I have a REST API, like I said, REST admin settings. So I'm sending back an admin setting object with some information. This really doesn't matter. I mean, it's the object I'm sending back to the UI. So I'm going to send back the bundle ID, the component name, in your case it's bookworm, the setting name, so it could be preferred book, the value, and an error message if I have any. So this REST API, I'm going to correct that real quick. Okay, so I corrected the JDK issue. So I have a REST API, and I'm going to pass some information to the REST API. I'm going to say, well, I want for this bundle ID. So my bundle ID is BMC artist. Sorry, my bundle ID is example sample library. I need to pass the component name. So in my case, the component name is bookworm. And I want the settings preferred book and preferred author. So I'm going to fetch one at a time. So how is it working on the Java side? So on Java side, you need first to create, to get an admin header object. This admin header is going basically to only contain your bundle. it's setting the bundle scope. So you want the information from your bundle. You don't want like an admin setting that is set in Innovation Studio or globally. So you pass the bundle ID and you set the global space to false because you are only interested in your bundle ID. Then you need to instantiate an admin setting data container. And so with data holder, you are using the service locator to get the admin data from your component. So in our case, it's bookworm, passing the admin header, so which contains the bundle ID and local. Once you have that, you need to prepare to get a data map, the result. So you get your data holder and you get the data. And when you get the data, well, you are interested in one setting. So here you could just return data map and you would have one object with all the settings, but in our case we want to return only one specific object. So we have a data, and which is an admin setting get data, and so we are using our data map to get one specific setting. So I'm setting my bundle scope to come example sample library. My component name is bookworm, and I'm interested, for example, in preferred book. So that's what's happening here. We are drilling down. So first we get our object for our component in our bundle and local. Then we are getting the data map and then one specific data that we are sending back. So that's the way it's working on the backend. So it's not really user friendly, but once you get the grip of it, it should be easier. Then in a view component, I created a view component to get the admin settings. So I don't have any configuration, I don't have any input or output parameters for it. And basically what happens is, so you have two methods. One is getting the information from the backend, another one from the UI. I could have done everything in one call, but it's just, if you're looking for one specific example, it's just easier to split. So the way it's working is that I'm using $QL to getting my preferred book and my preferred author. So I need to do two calls. So I created a resource, and the resource is very simple. It's just going to use the REST API I created. So which is get admin settings, get settings, which is in my Java code. Get settings, and I need to pass bundle ID, component name, and setting name. So here in my resource, you can see that I have three parameters: bundle ID, component, and setting name. And I'm sending that to the REST API. I'm calling the REST API. So my bundle name is, it's three constants. So I have a bundle ID, come example sample library, and I got my two entries. I got my component name, which is bookworm, and my two settings. So here I'm saying, well, I want my bundle ID, I want to get admin settings from the backend using passing the bundle ID, the component name bookworm, and my preferred book. Then I'm doing the same call, but this time to get my preferred author. So when it's coming back, I'm sending back the object, admin settings I define. So I just have to get the data, so data.preferred book dot setting value, and I'm just going to display it. On the UI side, it's working pretty much the same way, or maybe not. You don't have really to drill down. You have one call only using the object Rx administration setting resource, and you just give the component name and you will get the data. I mean, you will get all data. The only trick is you need to set up first, like we did in Java, you need to tell that it's local and you need to give your bundle scope. So for that, it's two separate calls you need to do beforehand. So it's a rec administration setting resource set context to true to say it's local, and you use the same thing .set bundle scope to give your bundle ID. So first you define the scope, and then you call your REST API. So here I'm calling get component setting data, passing the component name, and it's going to return an object with all information. So my component name will be bookworm, my setting name will be preferred author, and setting value will be Frank Herbert is great, but actually you will have two of them. So here you will have an array with these two objects. So you will have something like this actually. You will have an array. So here you will have preferred book, tune, so you will have something like, oh no, actually, so the owner key value will be the same, but here it will be different. But that doesn't really matter. I mean, this is just an example. So here you will have an array with two objects, and each object is one setting name and value pair. So anyway, so you're calling that, you get all the data. So now what you can do is that you can use Lodash. So Lodash is a third-party library we have in standard lib, so you can use. So I'm just going to use, rather than saying, oh, I'm going to go through all objects, and I'm going to try to see which one contains my setting, because here you will have something like values. So rather than just traversing and get the right one, what you're going to do is that you're going to find, so you're going to look inside this array, and you're looking for an object that has this signature, setting name being my preferred book name, which is that. So here I'm going to look for an object inside these values that match setting name preferred book. So it's going to find it, and it's going to return specifically this one. Then I'm going to find the same way for the preferred author name. So this time it's going to look for this string, I mean this key value pair, and so it's going to return me this object. So now I have my two objects, preferred book, preferred author. So I'm just going to use a Lodash again to get the setting value. Get is, it's exactly as using UI preferred book getting value, setting value. It's just that if it doesn't exist, for example, if this object is undefined, here you would have an error if I do that. Get is going to be smart enough, and if this object doesn't have this method, this attribute, then it's going to return undefined or something. So Lodash is pretty cool for this kind of thing. And after that, I'm just going to say, well, I'm going to set it, and I'm going just to display the data here from the backend, from the UI. So I will have something like that, backend and UI. So once again, it's not really super easy to use, but it can be very, very helpful. And once you did it like maybe 1 or 2 times, it should be easy enough.